Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be, both to our live audience and to those of you watching on YouTube. Welcome to Train Tuesday. I'm your host, Jim, and so pleased to have you with us tonight. We're going to be talking Athearn HO scale freight cars, a valuable resource for no matter what size your layout is. We're going to be talking some box cars, some express cars, and some covered hoppers. So a pretty good variety tonight, all within the Athearn HO line. But let's do what we always do. Let's get started by seeing who's joining us here tonight. I'm going back a little bit. We have KCG Rail Gilbert, Santa Fe Productions, Matt's Conrail Chicago Mainline. We have Eugene, Darren, Anessa. Let's see, BN Green 1970 has joined us. Late Night Model Railroad is here, folks. Anthony has joined us. Donald, DG Model Works is in the house. Daniel is here. We've also got the MTG squad is here. Ian, Jack, Julian, Nick, Roger, Canadian Locomotive Logistics, Michael, Terry. Hey, want to thank you all for joining us tonight. Like I said, we're going to be talking about Athearn HO freight cars. These are cars that, depending on what area you're modeling, we're probably going to have something for you tonight. And no matter what industry you may have, no matter what type of passenger train you may have, we're probably going to have something for you. So I'm looking forward to tonight's show. Now, keep in mind, we'll go through each separate set of models. We'll leave a time open for questions and answers, and then wait till the end of the show. If you've got some more broader questions for Athearn, we'd be more than happy to help you with some answers. But remember, when I'm going through those screens, I don't always catch those. So I try to look out for them, but that doesn't always happen. It's always fun to try to see what you guys are commenting out there in the virtual train world. So let's do another round of shout outs. We've got Richard, Tim, Eric, Mickey's Memories, Robert, and Nick. So thank you so much for joining us. Let's do what we always do. Let's go ahead and get comfortable in the workshop chair, put down the hobby knife, and grab the beverage of your choice, and let's get started for another Train Tuesday. Now, as I was saying earlier, we're going to be talking about Athearn freight cars, Athearn HO freight cars to be exact. And we're going to start going back into the 1970s and talking about the Pullman standard cars, specifically the Pullman standard 5277 50-footer. Now, in the middle of the 1970s, there was the incentive per diem boxcar boom, and it was just beginning. New brightly painted boxcars seemed to be appearing overnight. Many were lettered for various short lines. Pullman Standard was a significant builder of many of these cars, and the 50-foot outside post non-terminating end boxcar became the foundation for new per diem cars built in the 1970s. The 50-foot PS cars also varied in door configuration and style, better to suit each customer. These models can still be seen today roaming the modern railroad scene. So if you're modeling the 1970s, this is squarely in your wheelhouse. Let's take a look at some of the models that we're offering for pre-order. Now, these are available for pre-order until Friday, July 29th, and that's coming right up. So don't miss out on these. If you see anything that we're talking about tonight, talk to your dealer tomorrow morning. First one we have here is the Detroit and Mackinac. This is centered in 1975. A little background here, the Detroit and Mackinac Railway was informally known as the Turtle Line. It was a railroad in the northeastern part of the Lower Peninsula in the U.S. State of Michigan. The railroad had its main offices in the shops in Tawas City, and with its main line running from Bay City North to Sheboygan, and operated from 1894 to 1992. The road was sold to Lake State Railway in 1992 and thus ended its existence as an independent railroad. We're offering the Detroit and Mackinac and the road number you see here, as well as an additional road number. Looking at the markings of the Detroit and Mackinac, you can tell this is firmly set into the 1970s. You've got your ACI panel there. Definitely a call out for late 60s into the 70s. Coming up next, another one we're offering with 2 road numbers each. This is the Chicago and Illinois Midland, and this depicts a car as it appeared in 1979. Now, some background on the Illinois and Midland Railroad, still around actually. It is a railroad that serves the state of Illinois, mainly Peoria, Springfield, and Taylorville. Until 1996, when Genesee and Wyoming Incorporated bought it, the company was named the Chicago and Illinois Midland Railway, which is what we're looking at here. Once it was at one time a Class 1 railroad, and really interesting history if you want to look this up. It was a coal hauling railroad. A lot of its customers, a lot of its sources right here in the state of Illinois. Now, by the end of 1970, it operated 121 route miles on 214 miles of track. It reported 255 million ton miles of revenue freight that year. Now, it's obviously not at what it was at one time, but by the mid 70s, they were one of the customers that took part of the per diem. So if you are modeling this railroad or any of its connections, you're going to want to pick up both of these cars. Again, 2 road numbers for the Chicago and Illinois Midland. Coming up next is the Pearl River Valley. This is another interesting short line. The Pearl River Valley Railroad was a short line railroad that ran from Nicholson to Picayune, Mississippi. It was in operation from 1917 and was abandoned, unfortunately, in 2007. Very interesting railroad. And while doing some research on this short line, I found a website that you may be interested in looking at. And for you guys that are modeling HO and you have a limited space and you want a shelf layout, you might want to do some research on this. But do a quick search online for hawkinsrail.net / short lines. And there's a whole segment of that website dedicated to the Pearl River Valley. Now, as small as this railroad was, they did take part of the per diem, and that's why this era of railroading is so colorful. There was so many short lines that were taking advantage of what was once just heavily for Class 1 railroads. For you fans in the Michigan area, I've got another one for you. We have the Lake Superior and Ishpeming. 1974 is where we've got this car marked at. The Lake Superior and Ishpeming Railroad is a U.S. railroad offering service from Marquette, Michigan to nearby locations in Michigan, the Michigan Upper Peninsula. It began operations back in 1896. The LS&I continues to operate as an independent railroad from its headquarters in Marquette. As of 2016, the Lake Superior and Ishpeming's primary remaining business continued to be the transport of iron ore over a 16-mile short line from Tilden Mine, operated by Cliffs Natural Resources, south of Ishpeming, to Lake Superior for transport. So really interesting. Another one of those railroads that you might want to take a look at if you want to do something a little bit different than your standard Class 1 railroads. Again, this one is going to come in 2 different road numbers. Now, I'm sure many of you have probably seen these. This is the Pitkins Railroad. This is 1975. It's a short line that is operated on 2 separate divisions in the upstate region of South Carolina. There was the Easley to Pickens, 9.9 miles. It was abandoned and unfortunately lifted in 2013. However, Anderson through Beltran to Hunna Path is 28.5 miles. Now, connections are made with the Norfolk Southern at Easley and Anderson and with the Greenville and Western Railway at Belton. Rail was 85 to 100 pounds on the Easley-Pitkins segment and 85 pounds on the Anderson to Hunna Path segment. In 2000, the Pitkins acquired a fleet of former CSX GE U-18Bs. They're numbered 9500 to 9508. One of those units, 9501, is used for parts. Anderson Belton handles everything from kaolin, limestone, synthetic rubber, rubber processing, plastics, silica, scrap metal, paper, scrap paper, bird feed ingredients, believe it or not, farm supplies, and electrical equipment. So a busy, busy railroad, of course. Another one, any of these short lines you're going to want to take a look at. There's a lot more interest as of late of guys modeling some of these smaller uh, short lines, and they are indeed, in many cases, just begging to be modeled. Going into the grand scheme of things, we've got one that we've all seen, and that's Railbox. This is a 1980 plus car. There's a lot that can be said about Railbox. They are now owned by TTX Transportation, and these were commonplace in the mid to late 70s, throughout the 80s, and even today. You'll still see these in various paint schemes. The logos have changed a little bit over the years, not much, mainly in size. But these are everywhere. And so if you're modeling the 1970s, 1980s, it doesn't matter what railroad you are operating, chances are these railbox cars were on that line. So a couple of things as far as the features of these cars. These are all going to feature 10-foot Pullman standard doors. Your grab irons, your end ladders, your brake wheel, all that are separately applied. There's going to be a photo etch coupler crossover platform, and of course metal wheel sets with RP25 contours. They're all weighted up to NMRA standards, and of course they're painted and printed for realistic decoration. If you've got a question as far as the minimum radius on these, minimum radius is 18, although 22 really looks good with these cars. So we'll take a little break here and see if anybody out there has got some comments, questions about the Pullman standard cars. Let me go back to my screen here so I can see what you guys are saying. I'm seeing a couple of comments out there about road names that you'd like to see. Some of you probably get tired of me saying it, but I'm going to say it again anyways. If you've got a suggestion for a locomotive or road name or anything like that beyond the scope of this Train Tuesday, please go over to athearn.com, select the Contact Us page, and use the email athearn-productsuggestions@athearn.com. Submit those suggestions there. That's going to be your best way to get those suggestions to our product developers. Let's see. So Brian, these are predominantly 1970s. Most of the cars that we just showed, you can see on our website under the new announcements. These are 1975 on. The per diem era was a program that allowed some of the smaller railroads in the country to take part in getting their own box cars. And that's why it's such a colorful era. But that's pretty much the mid 1970s. And you'd see these cars in some cases go onward into the 90s. So if you're modeling the 70s and 80s, these are squarely in your wheelhouse. You can probably stretch it a little bit into the 90s. See what other questions do we have here. Anthony, I'm not sure which engines you're looking for as far as what would match those cars. It's probably a possibility in the future, but not in this current run. BN Green 1970 says nothing says late 1970s like the wheel inspection dots on per diem box cars. Thanks for including those and the ACI labels on Athearn, not just Genesis. Yeah, you're welcome. Now remember, Athearn cars are going to have details. They're going to have just as many details that you're going to be satisfied with. Genesis will take it up a notch by putting a little bit more underframe detail, and in some cases, roller bearing bearings, and of course cut levers and rubber hoses. But these guys have the grab irons, the separate ladders, the separate brake wheels, things of that nature. And so we also want to make sure that the paint is accurate. And so, like you said, nothing says 1970s like those two details right there. Got time for maybe one more question on these. I'm going through. Jim, thank you for making suggestions. Now, please realize, I think I've said this before too, realize that we are not going to reply to you. That is a depository. We're wanting to see what you guys want. Unfortunately, our developers are so busy, they don't have time for conversation and talking about models. They've got to actually build the models that you guys look for. So you won't get a response. That's pretty much just, we want to see what you guys want. All right. Bobby chimes in and says, they all look great. Can't have too many boxcars. No, that's true. Doesn't matter if you've got a club layout or a home layout or just a small shelf layout, you're going to need these. Okay, we're going to go back to our stream here, and now we're going to be talking about something a little different, something that we have not offered in a while, actually. During the heyday of passenger service, mail and express traffic was a viable part of railroad business. These 40-foot double-door boxcars equipped with high-speed trucks represent prototype cars assigned to this service. They are decorated to match our recent release of the 60-foot arch roof passenger cars, and we're going to offer these in 3 road numbers each. Now, bear in mind, there is a little bit of liberty on some of these, but where we could, we tried to match them to the prototype as best we could. Now, briefly, what that means is some of those commodities before air traffic and certainly over-the-road trucking, a lot of the hot commodities would actually hitch a ride on these passenger trains. And so these boxcars were outfitted with high-speed trucks and painted to match the colors of the passenger train in which they are in. Now, the first one we have is a 1952 era Union Pacific. And remember, we're going to be offering these in 3 road numbers each. So you can add as many to your passenger set as you like, or just have extras for future passenger trains that you're going to build up. Up next is the Pennsylvania Railroad. This is indicative of the 1940s. Hard to miss the Baltimore and Ohio, the royal blue. Really, really nice paint scheme. We're offering 3 road numbers of the B&O. This would be 1940s. Canadian Pacific, same thing, about 1940s. 3 different road numbers on these. Rio Grande, we had to offer Rio Grande. Rio Grande is one that is quite often requested. 1940s era paint scheme. And then last but not least, certainly not least, especially with USP fans, that daylight paint scheme. One of the most picture perfect paint schemes out there. Really a great looking paint scheme on a passenger train, or in this case, an express boxcar. 1940s era. Now, some of the features these guys are going to have is they're going to have double Youngstown doors. They're going to have the separately applied brake wheel and roof walk. They're going to have the correct express style trucks with 33-inch machine metal wheels and, of course, the RP25 contours. Like all of our cars, they're going to be weighted to the NMRA standards. They're going to have body-mounted McHenry operating scale knuckle couplers. And like I was saying earlier, these are highly detailed, injection molded plastic, so they show up the details really nicely. And of course, they're painted up per the prototype. And it's took our guys quite a bit of time to find the individual photos. Some are easier than others. Some we kind of had to take a little bit of liberty to, but for the most part, these are great additions to your passenger set. And with us doing train shows again, if you're a part of a modular club and I've already got those 60-foot arch roof passenger cars that we released. These are perfect to go with those. And believe it or not, these are acceptable on a minimum radius of 18. So you shouldn't have any problem navigating on just about any layout. So let's see. Let's see what else we've got here. Yes, it did. That Rio Grande scheme lasted well into the 90s, and it was a really, really nice trim scheme. Tim's got a general question, just out of curiosity. Did any of these cars last into the 70s and were used for general freight service? There's a prototype for everything. I don't have any hard evidence to say anything that I showed was used in the 70s. That does not mean it wasn't. Quite often, these cars would be used for a variety of things. Remember in the 1970s, that was towards the end of the 40-foot box cars. A lot of railroads, by starting around 1968, was removing the roof walks, lowering the brake wheel, changing things up overall. Sometimes they would end up as a maintenance away car. So it's possible. My suggestion to you is if one of those railroads catches your fancy, do a little bit of research, do a little bit of digging. It is possible that a car like that would have lasted into the 70s, although not strictly in a passenger service capacity. So here's kind of an answer right here from Matt's Conrail Chicago Mainline. The Illinois Railway Museum is using a Union Pacific Express boxcar for parts storage. It's parked behind the Interurban car shop in a very faded two-tone gray. Yes. So there you go. Even if you got a layout, maybe you got a yard in that layout, you can always put that in there, a little bit of weathering, a little bit of distress. It would definitely tell the story of what era you're modeling. All right, coming up next, covered hoppers. These Athearn covered hoppers are perfect for a variety of your industries on your layout. Now, the two bay covered hopper, like we see here, first entered service in the 1950s. The cars handled loads such as cement, sand, and similar dense bulk commodities in the 1960s. American Car and Foundry introduced the center flow design. The car's rounded body provided structural strength without the added weight of bracing, as well as making gravity unloading easier. This two-bay car came in a 2,970 cubic foot capacity, hence the ACF 2970 covered hopper. Now, the first one we have here, and again, we tried to pick roads and errors from all over. We've got a 1989 on up CSX. This particular one, 220634. Take a careful look at it because we are offering all of these cars in two different road numbers as a single, but we're also offering them as a 3-pack. Now, in the case with the CSX that you see here, there's some subtle differences because these were repaints. So here's 220634, and here's 220653. Very subtle changes. I'll do it again. Very subtle, but there are some changes. So I wanted to put those both on the show tonight so that you guys could see what our developers do to make sure you're getting accurate cars. And then, of course, available as a 3-car set, separate road numbers from the 2 singles. And that's the way it's going to be with all the cars tonight. They're all going to be like that. Going back to 1970 is the ACF leasing car. Again, 2 single road numbers with a 3-pack. This is good for you guys that are doing early 1970s. The build date on these is 5 of 69. Guys that are in the 80s, you're going to want to take note of these. These are the Burlington Northerns. These were based on a former CB&Q. 1980s, and these were all over the place in the Midwest, out to the West Coast. Some even made it as far as into the South and into the Northeast. But if you're modeling the 1980s, we've got these as 2 singles as well as a 3-pack. Speaking of CB&Q, we are offering a CB&Q version. These are as they appeared brand new in 1966. These were Among some of the last ACF covered hoppers the Burlington route would receive in their gray with their Chinese red markings. Striking car. And then just think a few years later, they would end up as Burlington Northern. Still a nice looking car. So if you're modeling 1980s, the Burlington Northern's where you're going to want to go. 1960s, and don't worry, if you're modeling early Burlington Northern into the 70s, a lot of these cars lasted quite a while before they were repainted. Here's one that you don't see every day anymore. This is the Corning Glass Works. This is based on a car prototype of 1970. We are offering this in 2 singles as well as a 3-pack. We get a lot of requests for this next line. That's Missouri Pacific. This has got the Buzzsaw logo on it. We're offering this in 2 singles as well as a 3-pack. Now, this is based on a car from 1979. So obviously, if you're modeling the 80s, you have liberty to model this at any type in the time in the 80s, as weathered as much as you like. Some of the features on these cars, depending on the prototype, they will feature round or through hatches. They will have photo etched metal roof walk, which look just spectacular on these cars. Grab irons, stirrup steps, brake wheel, all of that is applied separately. All the outlets that you see on the bottom there, those are going to be fully detailed. The brake cylinder, the valve, the air reservoir, and the wire brake plumbing, that's all separate. So really nicely detailed. These are Athearn HO. Metal wheel sets, body-mounted couplers, of course, and the minimum radius, 18 inches. And again, these are perfect for just about any layout. So if you've got anything that has to do with silica or sand or anything that would be a dense commodity, that's why these are a 2-bay. They're made for a real heavy material. And again, we've tried to offer things, roads as far as like 1960s all the way up into, you could even push that into the 90s with the case of the CSX. All right, with that, let's see what kind of questions you guys have on the ACF covered hoppers or some Athearn questions in general. We've got a little bit of time and we can take some questions. Joe wants to know, are the numbers for the Corning car the same as before? We try to, whenever we do a road, rerun a road, we try to make those road numbers different so that you can add to your fleet. Freight cars are one of those things where if we've offered a road that you've stocked up on in the past and you want to add to that fleet, we typically make the road numbers different. So long way of getting there, but yes, these are going to be different from the previous release. Tyler says, excited for the new freight cars. Need some rolling stock for my layout. Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure what era that you're modeling, Tyler, but you probably got some good options here. Here's an interesting factoid for you. Rock Island used these ACF 2-bay hoppers in branch line grain service in the 1960s and 70s. Yeah, that makes sense. Brian says, I got my pre-order for all of my ACFX cars at Lombard Hobbies. Well, thank you. We're glad that, Brian, that you saw some models that you like, and I'm sure Lombard is happy too. Lombard is one of our larger dealers. They stock a lot of our stuff. If you don't have a local hobby shop near you, don't forget we also have a lot of online dealers, such as Lombard, that would be more than happy to accept a pre-order from you on anything that we've talked about on tonight's Train Tuesday or Train Tuesdays from the past few weeks. Late Night wants to know, wait a minute, I thought Athearn was road specific, not road number specific, or is that just a variation for variation's sake on those CSX? Good question. You are right. Athearn is road specific. However, those CSX cars, they were repaints. And with any repaint, um, there can be some subtle changes. And so we like to incorporate those subtle changes per the prototype, just to make it more interesting and, to faithfully follow that road. For whatever reason, those CSX cars had those subtle changes. They weren't like the CB&Q cars that were pretty much cookie cutter paint schemes with different road numbers. By the time CSX had their cars from their previous owners, they went through a series of repaints. And anytime there's a repaint on a big road, there's always going to be some subtle differences, and it makes modeling that much more interesting, and it gives a lot more work for our researchers as well. Let's see. A lot of good comments on the two bay covered hoppers. They're one of my favorites, actually. There's so many cool things you can do as far as industries with them. Going back just a little bit, see if there's any questions I may have missed. Looks like we got most of those covered. We'll go down a little bit to some of our newer comments. Let's see. Looks like Tim has got his friend picked out. Those Mopac cars will look good at the cement plant. Yeah, absolutely. All right. I've got time for maybe one or two more questions, and then we're going to go ahead and call this episode done. Let's see. So while I'm looking for a question, a couple of things. Don't forget, if you have not seen the survey that we had out on last week for the road names for GP7, go take a look for that. We'll probably run that survey again this week. I'll let you know that right now, Rock Island blue and white units are in the lead. They are, a lot of you guys are wanting GP7s in the Rock Island bankruptcy blue, and it looks like that might be a reality. So if you have already taken the survey, you can't take it again. But if you've not taken the survey, go ahead and look for that. Also, if you're watching this post live, look into the comments. We'll have a link for that survey in the comment in the video description down below. Let's see. I see another question. I'm going to look something up here real quick. Also, if you guys have questions on service, if you have something that you want our service guys to take a look at, when you email them, please give us your full contact information. That means your name, your mailing address, phone number, especially if it's a technical thing with the locomotive. Sometimes our techs like to reach out and talk with you to see what they can do to help you with your locomotive, or pinpoint exactly what the problem is. That being said, our guys watch the email on a daily basis. If you don't hear from them right away, give them about a day or two, especially over the weekends. It takes a little bit to catch up from all those emails from over the weekend. But that's your best course of action. If you do need a replacement part, please put the name of the locomotive or the freight car, the item number, the model number. Try to be as detailed as possible in your email. That way our guys can get back to you and get that part for you as soon as they can, get you back rolling, getting some revenue service done on your railroad. All right. One more question, and I think I will let you guys get back to it. You guys are probably in your layout room as we speak, or your workshop. I want to make sure don't miss any questions here. Okay. Tim wants to know, will these GP7s be chopped nose? I don't know in this run. Developers have not given me that information yet. Terry's got his vote in for the Caddy or Katy and Rock Island. I kind of figured that, Terry. I know you're a Rock Island fan. All right. Any hints for things to come? Well, there's always hints for things to come. You got to listen carefully. Sometimes I'll put a veiled message in there in this form of a popular song or something. But like I said, look at that survey. The link for the survey will be in our video description down below. While you're at it, if you haven't done so before, I'd appreciate it if you give us a like and a subscription. That way you'll know every time a new video comes in. We're planning on something in the background right now, and stay tuned to social media. You might see a notification for a new video going up. So stay tuned in for that. I did see somebody asking about the California cars and the minimum radius. I don't have that information in front of me, but I want to say about a 22 to 24 inch radius. We do try to design most of our freight cars to operate on an 18-inch radius. However, these cars are Genesis and they are to scale length. So 22 to 24 is going to be really a minimum for those type of cars. So hopefully that doesn't limit you too much, but hopefully that also answers your question. So with that, I want to bid you all farewell. Thank you for joining me tonight on Train Tuesday. Go out there, do some good modeling, be healthy, be safe, and above all, high greens. Good night, everybody.